There we are.
Shalom, shalom. We are here for part 4 of the Eric Twist Your Mind Upside Down series. And let's keep our ears open and our hearts open and let everything from the Ruach come on in. Eric, take it away.
Thank you. Here, you want to hold that? You can keep you company for a little bit.
Thank you.
This is going to be a door.
All right, so this is the 4th part, so I will carry off of referencing what we were just talking about in the previous video, which was having to do with a couple books I just recently read at the request of some other friends with a mutual interest. A book called Matrix Energetics, by Richard Bartlett, I believe is his name, if I recall correctly. Now I'm starting to fade perhaps in terms of accurate memory. But the other one was Healing Codes by Dr. Alexander Lloyd. That book, Healing Codes, Lloyd and his associate, I think it was Ben Johnson. Anyway, just to let you know how serious this stuff is, I think it was Ben Johnson, I think his name was, had Lou Gehrig's disease. And you cannot be healed from Lou Gehrig's disease. It just takes its toll and you die. And he did this Healing Codes, and the Lou Gehrig's disease disappeared. The book has numerous case studies, testimonies, documented from people who wrote in saying, hey, I had such and such an ailment. Some of them are psychological, some of them are financial, some of them are circumstantial, relationships or employer, this or that, and quite many of them are physical. Sicknesses, ailments, accidents. It could even be a car problem or a problem with your pet. And to do this Healing Codes thing, and some of them were instantly changed, healed, corrected. Others, the mind that was tormented, traumatized, suddenly was alleviated. They were at peace. And everybody wrote in and says, this is incredible. The author, Alex Lloyd in this case, Healing Codes book, had basically said throughout the history, for hundreds of years, people have been looking for this. People have been, all the way back, you might say, since the days of Plato, Socrates, Pythagoras, jumping ahead a few years, Isaac Newton, Einstein, that the entire, call it the surge, the wave action, the growing, increasing, developing human civilization has been trying to study physics in order to get to this place where we can affect our circumstances by changing the physics because of the way we think or speak. And this book he got as a download. I think he said he was on an airplane, if I recall correctly, and the download of information came so fast he was scrambling to write. He'd say, God, slow down. I can't keep up, or you'll have to remind me or something, but you're writing. And then it became this book. And he's not claiming to be some smart guy making up some stuff or thinking or tapping into some occultic information. He says, hey, this was given to me to help people. This is the Healing Codes.
Yeah. Muhammad said the same thing.
Oh, there you go. In good company. And this, and just, I'm not proselytizing him, but this is what I'm showing you what this book is about, because he starts off, the first chapters, he had a business as a psychologist for quite a few years, helping people or trying to help people, and he said his wife, just make people feel more at ease. I'll tell you what, I'm just telling you what the book said as I recall, just read it last week. And I'm saying this to make other people feel good about their own relationship. He was very mindful. He and his wife, when they first met, they sat there for hours, 4 hours or something, sitting on a blanket talking, and this is who I am, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I believe, this is what I'm looking for, blah, blah, blah. They spent months making sure they got everything solid, all the bases covered. Man, they're going to have a great relationship. Within a year, they both wanted a divorce. And she was crying and weeping and out of her mind, and she'd be taking antidepressants and woke up one night screaming, and the bed was bloody. She had her fingernails clawed her legs. Antidepressants will do that to you. That's pharmaceutical assistance, just so you know, prescribed by the doctors. This other guy, I think maybe it was the Ben Johnson, I don't want to misrepresent what I read, but the point is, he was a doctor prescribing drugs, and all of a sudden one day realized, gosh, him and everybody he knows prescribes drugs to alleviate symptoms, but none of them are addressing the core. And this thing they found, the healing codes, address the core, and as soon as the core is addressed, it all disappeared. No more drugs. No more therapies. No more spending millions of dollars going to counseling and help groups or whatever. Not that those things are bad, but this is what he's saying in the book. So this guy's wife had, he said, a whole bookshelf, thousands of books. She'd read them all. And she'd get to the end of it and go, I don't get it. How's this apply? How do I use this information? And he's, the guy said he hadn't read all those, but he's done his own studies. And so the interesting thing about both these two books, both Matrix Energetics and Healing Codes, is that the guys who wrote the books represents, each one of them, 40 years of investigation and research into their fields, and then tapping into other systems who spent 20, 30, 40 years studying, branching out. So all this huge amount of energy and resources gathering information ends up being in this book. How convenient, here it is. And the other side too, this guy and all his associates gathering all this information and bringing it into this book. And I found it interesting that both these two books are dealing with quantum physics and healing. That's the subject matter. And they're both of them saying that the main killer is stress. And stress plays off tandem with fear. And at the root of anything wrong, stress and fear. So if you can get rid of stress, you'll be sane and you'll be healthy. And you'll have better social relationships, and you'll do better at your job, have a better spiritual life. So it's like, well, how do you get rid of stress? It's really funny. There was for people who maybe perhaps watched Seinfeld, there was a particular show, and the Kramer character heard somewhere that the way to alleviate stress is to say the words, serenity now. And if you're in a really frustrating situation, serenity now, serenity now. I guess the point is, serenity now. You just bring it in and find your happy place. And it works. Of course, it's the Seinfeld show, it's TV, it's comedy, and blah, blah, whatever. No, but the thing is, both these people writing these books are tapping into that same idea, and I realized, wow, that's what Seinfeld was talking about. And then later on in the Seinfeld show, Seinfeld's talking to somebody else, or somebody else is talking to him, the guy that had led Kramer onto this, says, hey, it doesn't really work. All it does is it kind of stuffs everything down, and then later, it just explodes. And the funny thing about the show, the character George, because of the situation he was in, he was pretending to sell these computers so his dad would think he was doing a good job. Then what do you do with all these computers you supposedly sell? Well, he took them and put them in Kramer's apartment. Thousands of dollars of inventory stuffed in Kramer's compartment, and then all of a sudden you hear Kramer just explode, shouting serenity now, and smashing all these computers. It's like, oh, good. Haha. No, it's really, that's exactly what's going on, and both these guys were saying it in these books, that they know people that have gone through these help things, and they have this mantra or this technique, and it seems to work for a while, then all of a sudden the things explode explodes because you didn't really solve the problem, you just repressed the problem and found some other, like putting a Band-Aid over the surface when the subliminal subdermal was actually the source of it. So, where's the real solution? The matrix energetics, in fact, both those books I think were at 250 pages, 300 pages or so. The matrix energetics book, Richard Bartlett, just as a telltale off the top, in the preface recommended by somebody else, the intro, in the first chapter, he mentioned the word magic, sorcery, Kabbalah, one other word.
Ancient ancestor.
Well, just in the beginning, it's like, wait a minute. Now, anybody using those words, as a Christian, you're going to go, that's out of bounds. It's like playing tennis, and the first 3 shots are past the line too far. It's like, hey, look, you're not even on the court yet. And it's like, well, give the guy a break. Maybe that in his world, maybe that's just words. Magic, sorcery, wizard, that was the other one. Later mentioned Kabbalah. But the point is, that's just some people's lingo. That's just what they say. So that's perhaps forgivable. You know, I'm not going to hold that against them. And so he says, look, this is just physics. Quantum physics. And he explains that in the first couple hundred pages of his book. In fact, both books take a couple hundred pages just to explain how physics, quantum physics, molecular energy interfaced with geometry, matrix. And as I was reading it, you know, this symbol that I have up here, here's the letter Samek. It's a geometrical engineered structure. So that's geometry. Or say geometrics. And it has to do with structure. So you basically could look at that and say, well, this is a matrix, right? You have lines, then you have a reference of these kind of lines, and then, hey, look, this chart is lines, it's a grid, it's a matrix. So you could even say, well, this references some type of a grid or matrix, math, and see that's math is also where you get the word for mater, which is mother. So the matrix is also a womb. So this is the place where things are formulated or composed. The composition of the structure. It's all that stuff, which is basically to say molecules, which is also chemistry, which is also physics. It's just basically the, you might say that the how and the what of where we live, which is the stuff of science. So science is basically just trying to figure out how and what. So when Moshe turned to look at the burning bush, which is the word Mem, Dalet, Vav, Ayin, he was just trying to say, what's that and how's it work? That's just science. There's nothing wrong with that. In both these two books, it's just looking at science. In fact, they said there's this thing called the new physics. So they're mentioning going all the way back to ancient Greek thinking, trying to Pythagoras, the guy, you know, Pythagorean theorem, x squared plus y squared. I mean, if a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, so if c is the other here, you have a triangle, and if this is a 90-degree angle, so it's called a right triangle, and then this is the hypotenuse, and this distance from here to here, if that's a, and the distance from here to here is b. A squared plus b squared happens to be then the distance between here and here. We'll call the length of that leg c, and that equals c squared. So if you're trying to lay out a square building, you can apply that formula and get the exact number, and these are in the relationship of actually 3, 4, and 5. So if you take 3 or any multiple of 3, say 3, 6, 9, this would be 4, and you double it would be 8, triple it would be 12, so you could say 3, 4, 5 triangle, those are exactly square. or you could say 6, 8, 10. So whether they're meters or inches or miles, it just doesn't matter. That's the relationship with Pythagoras figured out, because he was trying to figure out, how does the world work? It's just physics. It's just math. There's no devil work in it. Tesla claimed that he didn't invent anything. He saw it. And then he built it, and he was able to tap electricity out of the air without being generated by some kind of mill engine coming out of water or wind or some other source. It's just physics. It's just chemistry. It's just reality. So the guy Richard Bartlett, though he mentioned the word wizard, magic, is it? Not necessarily. Tesla was being accused of using witchcraft when he had a radio-controlled boat, on the water. What happened back in Salem, Massachusetts, being burned at the stake? I mean, this is people killing each other for the sake of some of this stuff. So Richard Bartlett said he was 9 years old and he got hit by a car, went flying, and just before he hit the ground, he heard a voice that said, "Strike the mat." So he didn't know, he hadn't taken any martial arts, but he intuitively knew, just as he was hitting the ground, wham, he struck the mat the way you do in martial arts, and it saved him from getting really banged up. Like, where'd that voice come from? Later, when he took martial arts and he heard, okay, this is how you strike the mat, so he's thinking either some spirit guide stepped in and told him, or it was like time travel, a voice from the future engaged him in the past telling him to strike the mat. And later in his book, he addresses subjects of invisibility, levitation, and time travel, and saying, just back off, nothing to be scared about, it's just physics. As we were saying, if you said, here's solid matter, here's a piece of solid matter, a chunk of something, it's composed of a bunch of little pieces of something, and those pieces are composed of atoms, which are a neutron surrounded by electrons swarming around. But the electron, if you look at that, it's composed of other little tiny things, which are quarks glued together, and you look at that, and those little tiny things are actually a little string which is wiggling. String theory. The little strings glued together makes a quark, which makes an electron, which is part of an atom, which is part of that composes the compounds and elements that we know as material substance. If you looked at a blow-up view, a neutron, neutral, proton, positive charge, nucleus, in the nucleus, and then you have this orbit. Remember back in the 60s when they said this was the atomic energy symbol? An electron would be on this path, and another electron on this path, and that's the symbol they gave us back in the 60s, and then a few years later they forget it, that's not really what happens at all. That's just a symbol. What really happens if there's a nucleus and the electrons are in some sort of a cloud. And if you try to locate one, well, it's not really there. As a matter of fact, if you could take a photograph to observe where it was, they've done a bunch of experiments, just because you looked at it, it changed it. Every time you look at something, it modifies the behavior or the essence of that thing at a quantum physics level. So it's like if I said this, could somebody tell me what that chair looks like? Okay, tell me what the chair looks like. As soon as I look at it, the chair changes. Now, I don't see the chair changing. I could look at it and say, well, it's got bronze-colored metal and a pale yellow seat. But imagine if every time I looked at the chair, it changed. So if somebody said, what does that chair look like? And I go to tell them, oh, it's bronze legs with a yellow seat. And they're standing there looking at it and says, no, it's not. It's blue legs and a red seat. And then I look at it, it's like, no, it's not. It's green legs with a purple seat. If every time you look at something you saw an obvious change, how can you ever identify anything? You can't, but that's exactly the way things work in physics at the quantum level. Every time you look at it, you've changed it. And so if you try to describe it, you're describing something from the ancient past that isn't that, and you can't even prove that it ever was that. There's an interesting movie called What the Bleep Do We Know? And they're describing this stuff. They mention a fellow, he's not an integral part of the movie, but in the movie the character actress goes to a museum, and one of the displays in the museum is something from Dr. Emoto, a Japanese guy who, he did a couple books called Messages in Water, where you freeze water and look at it under a powerful microscope and it takes on a shape. And if you put the water in a glass and write on a piece of tape the word thank you, it changes the structure of the water molecule. Now, I know somebody else who said, hey, listen, none of his work's been able to be duplicated, so it's fake science, don't believe it. I don't know if that's true or not. A bunch of people believe it, some people don't, whatever. The concept, though, is if you look at something, it changes it. If you write the word thank you, what language does it have to be? Even English or Swahili or some other language, if you write the word thank you, because of the intent of the writing, it changes it at a molecular level to the point that with this strong microscope, the molecules of the water either look like crystalline snowflakes or they might look like dark lava, molten and kind of creepy versus beautiful and sparkly. It's like, just for writing a word? Well, then he tried other experiments where you project thoughts or music, or he took a picture of a Buddhist monastery and he set the glass of water on that picture, and it changed the molecular structure. And the point is, thank you, we are more than 90% water. And therefore, if somebody wears a shirt with a something on it, it could be changing your molecular structure. Or if somebody speaks words or says words to you. And then they tried various experiments where they're separating people by quite a distance, close range. There was an experiment where two people walked in a room, never met each other. This is in one of the books. Shook hands, hello, how do you do? And then they separated them, 50 feet apart, and they shined a flashlight into somebody's eye, and the other guy's eye constricted, the pupil in his eye constricted. He had nothing to do with that person. Another one, and you take a sample of your own DNA, put it in a test tube, and the person held the test tube, they're not even touching it, and now it's not even part of their body, it's a piece of their mouth lining in the test tube, and they said, think some nice thoughts, or think some bad thoughts. I'm ugly, I'm stupid, nobody likes me, I think I'll go eat some worms, you know that song you sing as a kid. And then they looked at the DNA, and the DNA was fragmenting and decomposing. And then they said, now think some nice thoughts, like, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And they look at it, it's like, the DNA was repairing, and the DNA isn't even attached to them. How does that stuff work?
As a man thinks, so is he.
As a man thinks, so is he. Yeshua said, if you ask, believing, then the very thing you prayed for, asking for, will become the reality. Maybe we just got to pray harder. How do you do that? Is it a matter of our strength? Richard Bartlett, writing in the book Matrix Energetics, just so you know where that's going, because he was got 100 stories about how it works. He says, like, you know, if you're he was a chiropractor, so like, man, my leg, you know, it's like, okay, where does it hurt? Right there? So he finds the place where, boy, there's kind of a bump there. Now, there might be a real bump in your real leg, or it might be, I sense some energy, a bump in the energy, or, okay, then you hold your hand there and you, wherever your other hand, here's the second hand. Now you imagine a parallel universe where in that universe there's no problem. You just picture the connection in the parallel universe where everything's okay, where everything's shalom. He didn't use the word shalom, but that's what the word shalom means, really. Whole, complete, healthy, full, just like it's supposed to be, in the ideal Edenic state. And as soon as you picture that, you let it go and give it to the universe. That's kind of like pray to God and put it in His head. Pray like it's all up to you, but believe like it's all up to Him. Or work like it's all up to you and pray like it's all up to Him. And people would see manifest healings. And this was just books. This book is present tense. Recent, it's just a couple years old. And then he wrote a second book explaining more of the stuff behind it. 200 pages into that book, he starts talking about how he has these guides. One time there was a lady that had a gallbladder. She was going to have surgery, and he had imagined, he heard that the Archangel Gabriel was this powerful angel. And so he thought, well, what would he look like? I don't know. And in his imagination, he's just putting this thing together. So he imagines the Archangel Gabriel, and he looks over and he sees some sort of hologramic image of the Archangel Gabriel sitting there eating a peanut butter sandwich. And he's saying, don't just sit there, get over there and help her. And the Archangel Gabriel got up and just stuck his hand inside, and instantly the girl was healed of her gallbladder thing. She says, wow, what was that? I feel great. Other people with problems in their back, scoliosis of their back, their backbone crunching down, and you picture this, and one lady got mad at him because she says, no, none of my clothes will fit. I got to buy new clothes because her backbone's straightened out, and she, and it's like, real stuff is happening. How? He was saying, hey, the most powerful force in the universe is love. So did the guy in the Healing Coach book. He said the most powerful force is love. The heart projection energy field like a toroid, as does the nucleus of an atom. Those two, an atom and the human heart, produces an energy field. And both of these guys, actually the guy Bartlett, the more you read, you realize his investigation was just about every field of shamanism that he could possibly find. So from a Christian perspective, he's out of balance. From his perspective, he says, look, I'm just making this stuff up. It's maybe not even real. Just like Brad was saying, it's like you take a philosophy course, study this textbook of processing all these thoughts and how is everything built, and then you finally learn it and you pass your test and get your grade so you can be now you know something, and then the last page of the book is, it might be the case that everything we just told you is just not true at all. Great. But at least they exercise your mind to think along a certain regimen, a certain order, and it might be true. But Yahweh said, as we just read in Deuteronomy 29, and Jesse read in Isaiah 28 last night, if they don't speak according to the Torah and the testimony, there's no light in them. And Yahweh said, He has apportioned certain things, like some stuff in the stars, to look towards your energy coming from here and there, to the other peoples, but not to His people. To Israel He gave prayer and His word. So I read this other book by Rabbi Nachman, just on the airplane flying in. He's a rabbi, lived a few hundred years ago, whenever it was. In Israel, there's like a whole denomination according to his type of thinking. There's a little book that was called The Outpouring of the Soul. It's not Christian. It's Jewish. However, he made about 60 points regarding prayer, and every single point I was well familiar with, though I'd never read the book. But because he was expressing the heart that I think we all experience. Like sometimes you feel alienated from God, and it's like, I don't even know what to say to the guy. I feel kind of almost embarrassed. He says, oh, that's the best time to pray. I don't know what to say. Just say anything. And even if you can't say anything, just stand in His presence. And even if, and I'm using his words by saying God. I don't use these words unless I'm quoting somebody else, just so you know. But he said, even if God was mad at you for some reason, because you were a rebel, you had turned away, if you just keep coming back and keep appealing to Him, you'll finally wear Him down, and He'll say, gosh, look at my child keeps coming to me. I can't stay mad at him forever. And then you read in Jeremiah 31, Ephraim, the northern kingdom, was such a teenage punk that just ran off and just did everything wrong. It was like the prodigal son story that Yeshua talked about. And then all of a sudden, Ephraim comes to his senses and says, what have I done? I've broke my father's heart. I've wasted everything. I've ruined my life. What have I done? And then in Jeremiah 31, you can read where Ephraim says, bring me back and I'll come back. So Nachman is saying, if you don't even know what to pray, say, please give me something to say. I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to come back to you. Please draw my heart and I'll be drawn. I'll respond. I promise I will. And then Yahweh says, is Ephraim such a delightful child or my favorite son that whenever I think of him, my heart goes fonder and fonder? How do you break through the Father's heart? Just turn. That's what he gave Israel. So what Nachman was saying is, we don't need any two-point plan. And the guy in the healing codes would say you hold your fingers like this and you focus on where your pineal gland, your third eye is, and then where your Adam's apple is, and then your square of your jaw, and then your temples, and you say this paragraph. I pray that the cellular memory and the wrongful events and this and that, it's part of the book, we'll go into that later, but the point is, just a short paragraph. I pray that all these bad things that happen, generational curses or whatever, would be revealed, found out, addressed, cleansed, and that the light, life, and love of God is instilled in the place where, and say the person's name, it might even be your dog, it might be the lizard whose head you stepped on and crushed it, and I release this to happen. Say those words, they're saying vocally, and it happens because you've changed the universe. And it's like, why didn't Yahweh our Elohim tell us to hold our fingers a certain way? Well, maybe if you hold your fingers this way, it's like, I don't think that stuff means anything. If you want to do it, I'm not saying it's evil, but what I'm saying is Yahweh said, ask, seek, and knock. Return to the regard of my words with all your heart and all your soul. He didn't say we have to hold our hands in a special way. He didn't say we have to imagine, like in Bartlett's case, he didn't do it on purpose, but a hologram of Superman showed up in one case. He saw Superman's X-ray vision go into this girl and illuminated a problem in the optic nerve. And when Bartlett then considered the correction of the optic nerve, instantly the girl could see. It happened. It was a real thing. How does that happen? Why do shaman, witch doctors, and medicine men have effect? Because that's the way the world works. Yahweh designed it to work. And people who notice a correlation in the stars or in speaking words, do you know, have you ever considered the comparison words? In Spanish, cantar is to sing. A cantor is a guy who sings the Torah. Cantillation is the little marks like notes telling you how to sing those things. If you talk incantation, that's some kind of a spell. And if you talk about, there's another word, a horse that canters is a type of running, right?
A specific beat.
With a beat. The interesting thing about the word beat, the word resh nun nun, renan, is like a trickling stream, or a gurgling, say, which is to say noisy. The word Rhiannon is the word, I forget exactly the letters, but it means a leafy tree. Stevie Nicks did that song Rhiannon, which was a Welsh witch. The Israelites got in trouble for doing their witchcraft practices under every leafy tree on every high hill. Speaking, the reason why they call incantations spells is because they use words, they spell words with letters, and the Greek is a powerful, Celtic runes and Nordic ogams are two different magic languages, but they say that Hebrew is the most powerful. Most powerful? What? Because it works! That's why people doing sorcery and magic, witchcraft, necro is where you get the dead. So they're conjuring back the dead, which is the invoking of ancient ancestors. And this stuff works. Now, Richard Bartlett was not invoking ancient ancestors, at least that I could read in the in what he put into the book, but he did say that he was studying about Greek gods and invoked Hercules, and had an occasion where he had a Suburban, kind of like this Durango here, that was sunk 2 feet deep in mud, and he got out and he lifted the thing and pushed the thing uphill to get it out of the mud. Another time they were, well, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to tell you a bunch of stories. What I'm saying is that people who look elsewhere from the Torah are finding positive effect of healings, manifestations, and great things happening, including a lot of money, and changing circumstances out there. Something on the internet was changed because somebody did this with his hands here and pictured this thing and invoked the matrix of the energetics. Other people are saying, listen, I think it was Bartlett who said, physics and chemistry, there's this unknown factor that affects what we know how things work mathematically, which you'd think, well, mathematics and chemistry and physics, those are like locked-in sciences. Talking to a physicist a while ago, and he says, nothing in physics is locked in. It's all just pretty loosey-goosey, nebulous, and they're just trying to find ways of writing formulas to make sense out of it. But they know that it's not. And then Bartlett says, the mysterious X factor, the unknown, is consciousness.
Uncertainty principle.
The uncertainty principle? Is that what it's called?
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
I can't hear you.
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So, consciousness is our mind or heart working, functioning, such that when you look at something, it changes it. Why? Because your eyeballs are not just receptors, somehow they are also projectors of your mind, your spirit, your nephesh, your heart. Uh-oh, now it's getting creepy, now it's getting satanic. No, it's not! Elohim designed it. But that spark of life, we could say, is the letter Nun. It jumps out of the mem. Nun Samik. So we have that symbol there, right? So the other symbol that I've used with the Erectology class is Nun and Samik. The word bush is spelled, as in burning bush, is spelled Hey, Samik, Nun, Hey. That's literally translated the bush. So Samik and Nun composed together, or Nun and Samik composed together, looks the same if you put them into a little overlap. The word Nun Samik is the word banner. Banner. Yahweh Nissi. This is Nis, or Nas. Banner over us is love, he said. Yeshua said, if I be lifted up like Moshe lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, then whoever believes on me will be saved. What did Moshe do? The people of Israel were bickering, biting, complaining, and so vipers appeared. Were they manifested by the attitude? Maybe. Were they snakes that lived in the rocks and they just happened to be in a place infested with these dang things? Probably. Somehow the two overlapped and thousands of people were dying by these venomous vipers. So it says Moshe got a serpent on a stick is what it reads in English. It wasn't a serpent on a stick. It was some kind of rust-colored serpentine shape, like a flame, that was lifted up on a pole, made out of bronze. That whoever would, and now the word of the verb action is Hey Bet Yotet. Whoever would do that to this was saved from the snake bite. How do you do that? Interesting that the letters HBT, and if you add another T, this is where we get the word habitat. Habitat. But Yeshua used that as comparison, and he said, if I be lifted up, well, he is the living one. So Yeshua is this noon. And for him to be crucified is to be put on the stomach, which is this engineered structure like a trellis, which is Yeshua on the cross. So the noon on the stomach is a picture of Yeshua on the cross, which is also a picture of Moshe lifting up the serpent in the wilderness. It's also a picture of his banner over us, which is the most powerful force in the entire universe, which is love. And if they believe, but he just equated himself to what Moshe did. And Moshe said you have to habit. Well, if you look up habit in the dictionary, it says to look or gaze at. Contemplate. You can't just, well, it's okay, I look at it, that counts, I should be saved. Just stare at that. Don't stare at my artwork. Stare at the noon on the summit. Well, these hays look like wings. I mean, the letter hay is like that, and all I did, for what it's worth, is turn the other hay the other direction so they look like wings. Yeshua, the number 6, as the Vav man. Hey, look! So he has like these wings of witness. Hey, Vav, hey. Well, Yod, hey, Vav, hey, that's Yahweh's name. So hey is, here's another way to read Yahweh. The Yod is a hand, a working hand. So it's the hand of the Creator. There's a voice in nature, what he built. The stars, the plants, the animals, if you can hear his voice in nature, that's the voice of the Yod. Hey is an expression of. The expression of the Creator, where he told us the way things work, is the Torah. So I could say the Yod represents nature. Hey represents Torah. Yeshua, this is the number 6. Revelation says that 6 is the number of man. And so we could say, well, he's the Word made flesh, the Torah in human form. So this is Mashiach. And then Yeshua said, I will send you the Ruach HaKodesh to lead you into the truth. So this hey over here is the Ruach. So Yeshua, the man, has 2 witnesses. He has this witness, which is this hay, and he has this witness, which is that hay, which is the Torah and the Ruach. And they're both exactly the same. So when it says, if they speak not according to the Torah and the testimony, what testimony? Well, we also said that the Ruach was like the Aleph Bet, which is my little shorthand version of that. Well, what's the Torah composed of? The Torah is the Aleph Bet, written out in instruction form, both of which is Aleph Tav, and Yeshua claimed to be the Aleph Tav, which is his Father's will in human form. So you could say, well, he has displayed, that's the letter Hey, this expression of light, or just manifest. And if Yeshua said, I be lifted up, well, there's the noon on the Samech. I'll draw all men unto me, and whoever observes, ponders, contemplates, will be healed from their snake bite and live. That's the overlap, the comparison. He didn't say, if you could picture a parallel universe, put your hands like this. But what is it to believe, picturing a parallel universe? What is shalom, picturing a parallel universe? And so in the other book, with Alexander Lloyd, where he says, say the sentence, I pray that all the bad stuff that was brought into the cellular memory would be discovered, healed, and I hereby, by the authority of my own personal voice, release it to be so, that God, the light, life, and love of God, who is God? There's a whole study on this word God. Yahweh declared his identity, and it's not to get into, as Rad was saying, okay, look, we're not going to argue about the name, whether you call him Jesus, Lord God, Elohim, Adonai, whatever. It's like, no, wait a minute. Yahweh in Exodus 3. a couple times identified himself very specifically as the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzhak, the Elohim of Yaakov. Very particularly. This is my take on the bottom line thing before we run out of time. This is a short talk today, this occasion. It's not just God. It's not just some random deity. It's not just some power of the universe. Yahuwah himself very specifically identified himself in Exodus chapter 3. He says, I am the Elohim. I'm the one that your forefather Abraham talked to, that I made a covenant with him. And I made a covenant with your forefather Yitzhak, and I made a covenant with your forefather Yaakov. The guy that those three men were relating to, that's me. Not some random power, not some arbitrary force, very specific. So my take on Alexander Lloyd's healing codes of God, I pray that you would, it's not some God, it's Yahuwah. And we don't necessarily have to say that sentence, because he said, regard my words and my instructions with all your heart and all your soul. We read that. Isaiah 28 that Jesse was looking at, and Deuteronomy 29, Deuteronomy 30. So for us, with a heart of love, the most powerful source, choose to live. Choose life or death. Well, here's the Mishkan pattern. So I think that the real formula, if you would, is actually the Mishkan pattern, which he already gave us back in Exodus 25 when he talked about the Mishkan pattern. So here, it's not that you have to know or remember some special formula, say it just this way, or have just this variety of feather, or just this sequence of beads, or just this beat of the drum, or just these notes on the guitar. David found a secret chord to please the Lord. Oh, what was it? Was it 1-4-5? Was it a minor chord? Was it, if I only knew that chord? Serenity now. It's the Mishkan pattern. I'll show you. Moshe said, I put before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Choose life. So, choose life. Step one. Well, that's typified by the big white fence, four-colored door, which happens, so this, if this is basically white linen, and Andrew Hoy had a different way of doing the fences, that's a whole different thing. We won't talk about that. I'm just taking this stuff out of the scripture that says the colors, there was blue, the embroidery was blue, purple, and red. Of course, those are English words. So that would be Techilet, Arganon, and Shana. But that's a different matter. The point is, in my thinking, blue, the color of the sky, the authority. Remember, see the blue thread, that he's the guy that built this place. He made it according to a certain structure, and it works. That's the Yod, the way that it was created. Purple, royal decrees. Ah, that's the Torah. Red, Mashiach. Oh, okay, that's the Vav man. And then white linen is the Ruach, who tells us to walk in the ways of the Torah, which is the righteousness of the saints, keeping his instructions. Blue, purple, red, white, linen, and gold thread. But there you go. That's to enter his kingdom is to choose life. That's the big white fence. Choose life. Lines up with the Moed of Pesach, but that's another part of the story of the pattern that we'll go into later. We've gone to it before. It's on the chart. We'll talk about that if you want in detail later. But just to cut to the point of this, choose life. If you choose life, you do get the blessing. So in choosing life, you're choosing to be blessed. The alternative, which would be the death, brings the curse. So he says choose life. Now, what does that mean? How do you do that? For the lady, Lloyd's wife, to have had a whole library full of books and say, I don't get it. How do I apply this? Choose life or choose death. Within yourself, if you think, I want to choose life. Okay, now speak the words. I choose life. Why speak? Both these guys are saying there's power in the word. To speak sends out these vibration frequencies. You ever see a pond and you throw a pebble and the ripples go all the way around concentric and fill the entire, they say, light. When the very first light shone on the very first dinosaur, reflected off his skin so you could see him, that light wave showing the image of the dinosaur started shooting off into outer space. And if we could get into a spaceship and go faster than the speed of light and go way out there and look back at the Earth, we'd see the dinosaur. Because it keeps going forever. There's nothing to stop it. There's no friction. There's no barrier. So whatever we say goes on. So when you say, I choose life, there's something called self-talk. You're speaking the words, your own brain is hearing it and going, oh, okay. And it registers it as a fact. You can change your mind. You can change your heart. You can change your circumstances by speaking the right words. And when Moshe said, I put before you, and he was told from Elohim to do this, to say the words, I choose life, is huge. It's huge. It affects the molecules. It affects the fabric of the universe, seen and unseen, including your own heart. I choose life. You've set your course towards healing, towards health, towards sanity, towards shalom. It happens to line up with the letters Tet, entering the fence, Tet, which is to be sealed, and Yod, held as personal possession of Yahweh, our Elohim. I choose life. Right inside the Mishkan door was the barbecue grill, lining up with the letters Kaf and Lamed. This is like the Yod. Here's the Hey. It's Torah. Choose life intellectually, which would be the word Bin, Bet Yod Nun. Read what he said. And if you can't read, listen. Shema his instructions. It's right there in the Torah. Teach and learn. We mentioned the other day, the reason he chose Abraham is because he knew, he watched, he observed, he knew Abraham would teach and learn. So everything he said to Moses was, say to my Bnei Israel, say to my children of Israel, say to Aaron and his sons to teach them. This is how you teach them. This is what you say to them. It's all about listening to what he said. So listening to the Torah and intellectually hearing it and processing it is the Shema, which is Shin, Mem, Ayin. And what are you supposed to Shema? As you mentioned earlier, Shema Israel. Listen, Israel. Who? Israel. Listen, what? Yahweh? Yeah. What about Yahweh? Oh, he's this guy that we're... He's our Elohim. Okay, what about him? What about him? Yahweh? Singular. Echad. So here's this little thing. Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. 4 voices. The voice of... He's the guy who built nature. So if you look at nature and you figure out what's going on, that's a voice where he's declared himself. Hey, the Torah, that's another voice he's declared himself. Vav, the Messiah, that's another voice he's declared himself. And the second Hey, the Ruach, he's declared himself. And if you've got 4 different voices, they're not Echad. But if they all say the same thing, 4 voices, they're not Echad, they're all singular, that's him. So Yeshua could only say what he heard his father saying. The Ruach could only validate what the Torah said. Yeshua could only portray the Torah. He can't contradict it, nor can he send his spirit then to tell his churchmen teachers that the Torah was done away with, that it's no longer pertinent, because Echad, one voice. So he gave us this mechanism of Echad, and that's what we're supposed to hear, I think. That's because the message of the whole Shema is wrapped up in the last word. Echad. The singular, and then for us to have a heart regarding his matters, as you were so delightfully explaining earlier. If we have time, if we don't run out, I'll have you come up and explain it if you would. But the point is, choose life and Shema. Step 2. Listen to what he said. Step 3. Take it to heart. Here's the laver. which lines up with a mem, it's a womb. And that which jumps, that lives in the water and then can jump out is actually the noon. Mem is gestation, which is like the 49 days of counting for Shavuot, and the 50th day, the Yovel, the Jubilee, is that it's like being pregnant and giving birth. The word Hebrew, Iver, Ayin Bet Resh, literally means to be pregnant. It means a few other things too, but to be pregnant is to be Hebrew, which is to cross over to the place where you choose to have the seed of his Torah. Here I'll draw it like a little tetrahedron with a spark of life inside of it, as we drew the other day. That looks like a barley seed. That seed is planted in our hearts by intellectually hearing the Torah. So this looks like a field with furrows where the seed is planted, and the lamed is not just a shepherd's staff, but it looks like a hoe. You hoe the lines that looks like the kaf, that was an open hand, and you plant the seed of the Torah, and then you take it to heart, nurturing it within you. The laver was made out of the bronze mirrors of the women. It's a reflection of yourself. You look at yourself, you take it to heart, you contemplate, you process, you engage in this living dynamic of, even if you contemplate one word, even if you contemplate one letter, one little seed, you nurture it and you bring it to life and you feed it. And the noon that gets birthed out of you, if a woman gets pregnant, another soul gets birthed. But my take on what's happening here is that what jumps out is yourself unto eternity. How do you get born again? Well, the mem receives a seed of another person, but it's not the will of the flesh. It's by the Ruach. So the mem sophit is actually drawn as a closed womb. There's no opening to get the seed in. So from within, it's a picture of the virgin birth. How do you get born unto eternity? Like the virgin birth. The will of the Spirit. So this all has to do with the festival of Shavuot, which is the 50 days of counting. This has to do with Hag HaMatzot, Mem Zadi Vav Tav, find out how to do something, and remember, it means to find out, but Zadi is his command and his instruction. Follow his, read his commands, then take his commands to heart. With all your heart and all your soul. There's step 3. Heart and soul nurture the word that he gave. So if you want sanity, if you want health, if you want to restore the land and restore the world, for him to change the ecosystem such that the land of Israel will re-sprout and look like Georgia or Oregon, which such this beautiful Oregon, garden of light. Take to heart what he said, because you choose life, and this is the path of life. The next piece inside the Mishkan was the menorah. And Yeshua said, I'm the vine, you're the branches. Bear fruit. It's not an unlit menorah, it's lit with flames. How do you bear fruit? Galatians 5:22, New Testament, is a list of the fruits of the Spirit. But it's basically that word that we had up here earlier, oseh, asha, however you want to pronounce that. It means do it. Nike, the swish, just do it. Nike means victory. Do it. That's where the victory is. Do what? Do what he said. Because you took it to heart. Pretty simple. Depending on what your circumstances are, whether it's health, whether it's finances, whether it's social, whether your car broke down, I choose life. What did he say? Take it to heart and then do it. He said, rejoice in everything and give thanks. Okay, thank you very much my car broke down. Thank you very much for my boss and my job are giving me grief. Thank you very much. I can't communicate with my wife, or my dog is sick, or whatever it might be. Choose life. I choose life. I choose life. I choose life. What did he say? Rejoice. Be thankful. Turn to him. Acknowledge him. What did he say? Love one another. What did he say? Okay. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to fight. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. How do I do it? Do it. And remember, when you're doing it, the fruit that you bear is a seed. It's a fruit with a seed in it, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. There's the scales of Mishpat. Mishpat. Mem, Shin, Beit, Det. And that Mishpat says, whatever you choose to do in this situation, it's going to be measured back. Evil for evil, good for good. However you engage the person who's causing whatever the circumstances, here's this circumstance of a storm. There's some storm going on, and in the midst of that storm, number one, you choose life. Number two, listen, what did he say? Number three, nurture your heart and soul to regard what he said regarding that situation. Number four, just do it. And number five, remember, everything you do is going to plant a seed for its multiplication. 30, 60, 100-fold, like a head of wheat. One kernel of wheat turns into a whole head of wheat, multiplying. So if you do good, it'll multiply good. Scales are balanced. If you do evil, it'll multiply evil. And he's the guy that keeps the scales balanced, and he says, Mishpat is the foundation of my throne, so whatever you choose to do, as you are doing it, bear that in mind, have intelligence, know what's going on here. This isn't hocus pocus, this isn't some kind of necromancy, there's no demons working here, there's no ancestors you can blame it on, it's you and what you do. So this is to contemplate, to be aware. Which is what the letter Ayin even says. 6. Altar of incense. Lining up with the letter Pei, which is the mouth, which is also opens, and that mouth eats that fruit, which is to say, this lines up with the festival of Sukkot, which is here, which is, what are we doing? Pray, speak, fellowship, rejoice, Shemaiah. He said, the joy of the Lord is your strength. English. The one command for Sukkot is Ak, Sameach. This is only, and this is rejoice. But the word only is Aleph Kaf. Aleph is like the arrowhead and Kaf is the open hand. Here, this is, and as a suffix it means you. And the Aleph is the word for like Elohim or power, or that's the plan. So it's this powerful, and that means you, but it's also an open hand, which is like this gift, or it's your allotment. And so that's what we were reading earlier. He took Israel, Deuteronomy 29, he took them on a tour through all the other lands, and they saw the totem poles and the ziggurats and the artifacts and the gods of gold and silver and wood and stone, and he said, see how far they've gone astray. None of these are yours. What I have apportioned to you is your voice, your mouth. Just speak. Doesn't matter where you hold your hand. Doesn't matter if you got the script. Doesn't matter whether you understand. Rejoice in fellowship. Speak, pray. And this is the incense. He says the prayers of his people are sweet incense. And prayer, as we were saying, is not just saying, but it's meditating, pondering. He said, look, ponder, contemplate Yeshua being lifted up on that crucifix. Ponder the serpentine flame lifted up on the Nun Samek, the Nas, the pole. It represents his banner over us. It represents that he said, I lifted you up and carried you myself as on eagle's wings, reaching into the very crucible. It's like putting your hand in the middle of the stew pot of boiling water. He reached in, pulled out his people, and carried them over and set them down in the garden. And he's going to do it again. And he does it every time circumstantially. 7. The Ark of the Covenant, represented by the letter Zadi, a picture of the resurrection. And above the Ark of the Covenant was the pillar of fire and the pillar of smoke, which is the overview kuf, you might even say kuf and zadi kind of work together, which is to say the word for kuf, vav, kav is hope. My people perish for lack of hope. The hope set before us is the resurrection of not only in the future, not only of the nation, but also of us and our circumstances. So to picture the solution, to pay the zadi, to sing the solution, as my wife Karen says. Hi, Karen. Pei zadi literally means open mouth. It's weird pronounced pa-za, pizza. It literally means to explode or detonate. To explode with a detonation of rejoicing in prayer is the answer. There's the formula. And pizza is a visual expression, scattered fragments all over the place. Pizza literally is a picture of pizza. And when Yeshua, in Matthew 6, went up onto the mountain, seeing the multitudes, went up on the mountain and he sat down, and it says he opened his mouth. Why? Why does that verse say he opened his mouth? You never say that. You just say he went up there and he talked to them. No, he went up and he opened his mouth. It's a secret code. It's Pei zadi. Yeshua went up there and he says, let me explain how it works. Let me give you the Pei zadi. And he gave the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes are the same thing. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You know you're in the midst of a calamity, you choose life, and you are offered the kingdom of Yahuwah. Blessed are they that mourn. Why should you mourn? Because you walk in the door and you find the reality that we have inherited nothing but lies from our ancestors. We've all been deceived, deluded, led astray, and here is finally the truth. The light, the life, the love of Yahuwah, our Elohim. It's not some God. It's not some master or angel or spirit guide. It's Yahuwah, Elohim of Avraham, Elohim of Yitzhak, Elohim of Yaakov. The word Avraham is pinion wings, to lift up and soar. The word Yitzhak is hilarious laughter. And Yaakov means to jump into the third dimension, to be cubed. It's a mathematical term. The Kobah stone in Mecca is a big giant cube. It's like Superman coming from 2 dimensions to leaping into the third. When he says he's the Elohim of Avraham, Yaakov, and Yitzhak and Yaakov, he's saying, I am the Elohim that if you follow my protocol, you will lift up his wings as eagles, and with hilarious laughter leap over tall buildings and your obstacles like Superman. That's what he's saying by saying that, but it's hidden in the language. The hope set before us is the promise of the answer to the prayer. Like Bartlett said, hey, don't even try to project an answer. Let it go to the universe. You don't let it go to the universe. You put it in Yahuwah's hands. Then you let it go. The mind of Shalom. This is our sanity. This is our protocol. This is our healing code. This is his kingdom. This is our psychological therapy. This is our 12-step group interactions for encouraging each other to be on the path and everything be restored. It's right there in the Mishkan pattern. So the phantom X factor of consciousness, the consciousness of noon, is the Mishkan pattern, and the design of the universe, mathematically, geometrically, the quantum physics is the summit. And Yeshua said, if I be lifted up and you ponder me, interfaced with the energy of the description of how he built this place, just like Moshe lifted up that serpentine shape, that whoever looks at that will be saved and healed from the bite of the viper. And then speak the word. Yahweh Rafka, John. Yahweh Eli. That's all we need. Hashem Yeshua. He who told us so. There we have it. That's all we need. It's all there. So, real quick, we're almost out. Do you want to articulate what you were saying about...
About,
You want to come up and be on so that people can hear you through this?
was there anything specific you're referencing?
Well, just what you were saying earlier. It's about the same subject. And however you want to take that for a couple minutes is your
We were
field
talking
out.
about the heart of it.
Yeah, the heart of it.
To the Ruach,
Excuse me?
the one,
You have to be this side of the chair. That chair was to keep me from going over there by what I kept...
Can I sit in the chair?
Sure.
Okay. So, when you love someone or something, truly love them, you love everything and every aspect of them, every morsel of them, and you embrace them, and it's unconditional. So, and that's what we all yearn and long for. Well, if you can take that and embrace it yourself as it pertains to Yahweh, to Yeshua, to His Word, to His creation,
As you expressed in these words.
as you take that, when you read His Word, it's it's like an ignition where you're in responding to Him in His love language, and there's great reward that comes from that in your own relationship that I can witness. I can say that that's what I've experienced, so that's why I can speak on this. And when you're speaking the words and hearing them yourself, it's like Shema Israel. You're saying it to yourself because it's His Word. So really, when you're reading it and speaking it and loving, when you're reading these words and studying His stuff, it's the biggest breath of fresh air you could ever have, and it's all a big hug at the same time. And it just brings you closer in relationship to Him, so that you're walking that constantly. It doesn't just show up when you look for it. It becomes a part of you, and you carry it with you everywhere you are. And there's life in this, in Him. So there's light that shows up, and as it pertains to any and anything that goes on throughout the day, throughout the evening, throughout anything. And there's nothing else like Him. And to love every aspect of Him. The Yod, His hand, He's made it all. So it's the greatest love ever known, ever could be known. And nothing else compares. We can love one another through Him, but it's His love, and we really don't really become alive until we know Him. And it's a living, breathing, alive love.
And it's through His words.
And it
that we
is
know.
through His words. Each letter is a personality trait, a aspect of Him that's so great that what can we do but love Him and embrace Him? And He wants us to know Him. He wants us to know Him. So it's worth spending time studying each letter and having a personal relationship with each letter, so that when you do read His Word and pray and have moments with Him, because it's a special, personal, individual relationship. He talks my people all the time, and a lot of times people seem to think of this group thing, but it's really individual too. And it's so beautiful, and it's there's nothing else that can compare, that does compare at all. And it's the greatest blessing that we can know him and be his people and know him like this. And so whenever you read his word, it's like, when I read his word, it's so beautiful, it's so pure. It's like when a mother has a child and you, for the first time, see that beautiful, pure baby. It's so, it's more than that.
Innocent, intimate relationship you could ever
It
have.
is so pure and beautiful and alive that if you just embrace him, he's willing to show himself in fullness. And it's not a instant, like the world sort of implies, instant gratifications. He takes you away from that. He's taken me away from that concept of thinking that's structure. But it's set up like a kingdom, and it is so beautiful. So, there is life. Choose life. And I like what Eric was saying, in every moment, choose life. If something isn't smooth sailing, whatever's going on, it's perfect because he's with you. And it's like when we recognize that moment where no matter what is happening, no matter what it is, that beautiful relationship you have is still there. It doesn't ever fleet. It's constant. So we can just tighten up to him, and everything doesn't matter what it is, it's perfect because he's perfect. And if we can see that, and what is the scripture? Be perfect because your Father in heaven is perfect. Be kadosh because he's kadosh. So when we look at everything that he's created and everything that goes on and recognize his perfection in it, no matter what it is, then we're in a different place. And there's nothing that can hinder it. There's nothing that hinders us. It's like we just glide through.
So what Sally has just given you an experience of, I would put in the category of memnon. She is expressing from her own perspective what it means to take it to heart. And if you could see her body language of like a mother holding their infant, holding each word. And the reason I asked her to say this is because as we were talking, I saw that as she was reading these words while Jessie was playing guitar, and her speaking each word as if it was not only this delicate infant like your grandchild who's about to be born, but as if she was intimately relating to her betrothed,
Yes.
as you said. And it almost seemed too personal to bear witness of, but she was modeling for us the affection through the words of Yahweh himself, of Yeshua. An example of a pure heart and soul regarding these matters, which is why I asked her to do this. Thank you.
And it's like the labor in yours. It's a good reflection. We start receive reflection, but then we become a good reflection.
This is just the surface level. All these things get even deeper and more incredible as you ponder them. And just in closing on this particular video, the reason we're doing this is because I never heard anybody teach me this. I asked my mother, how many people in your life, almost 90 years, how many people that have been believers, pastors, evangelists, missionaries, professors, friends, teachers, how many people who've dedicated their lives to the Bible in your 90 years have told you to regard Yahuwah, his Moedim, the Shabbat, his language? She said none, zero, none. I've tried to tell her. One. In her whole life of 90 years. And I asked people on the California coast last week, same question. Out of the whole group, zero. None of them have ever been encouraged by another believer in their entire life to regard these matters. And yet this is the very answer to what those other two books think they found. But they didn't find Yahuwah or his Torah or his testimony or Yeshua, the embodiment of this word, as the energized geometric structure, the consciousness of Yahweh himself lifted up. Both those books failed to address it. This is the answer of all light life of Yahweh. This is the most valuable gem in the universe. Shalom.